What's going on, everyone? It's Mitch from RespectMyRegion.com coming back with another episode of the RMR Podcast. Today, joined by special guest Akele Parnell of Lab 11 ÜMI Farms out of the Midwest. Man, how you doing today, Akele?
Hey, what's going on, man? Doing good, doing good. Glad to be on.
Awesome, man. Well, before we get started into too much, every guest I bring on here, I always start with their origin story around the plant, that plant being cannabis. So whether that's personal, professional, a mix of both, whatever you want to be vulnerable and sharing, just kind of curious when you and cannabis begun your relationship with one another.
No, that's good. That's a good question. Uh, I can't remember the first time I smelled it. I smelled it a lot before I knew what it was, and that's like just as a kid, and like what's that stinky smoke type stuff or whatever. I think the first time though that I tried it, the first time I saw it, I was like 12, and I saw like a whole bunch of weed and stuff, like at a friend's house, and I was like, "Damn, what's that?" I didn't even try it at that point, and didn't even try it for real, until I was like 15. And just like outside, like, summer and stuff like that, just like knocking around, doing all the crazy stuff kids do and stuff, teenagers. And finally was like, let me see what this is about. And basically, like, yeah, had a great experience and like fell in love with it. It's like one of those like little, fantasy, I smoke sort of experiences. Didn't get like super crazy high, but it was just like a good high, and was like enjoyed it. So then from there, that just became something I'm interested in. Like I enjoyed that experience. Like, what is this all about? And sort of just started the process of like discovering the plant and different variations of like, THC and cannabinoids and stuff like that, whether edibles and other things. Um, Definitely coming from the South originally, which is where I was born. Um, I feel like we had, like, limited access and not as
Mhm.
good product all the time and stuff, and I mean, but again, at that point, it's relative because there's not, like,
Right.
super strong, like, Cali weed is just something we heard about in, like, rap songs and stuff, so it wasn't, like, a reality in my circle, so, what we it was good enough in getting the job done at the time, but, thinking back, I was like, "Man, that was some trash weed," but so yeah, so basically, sort of just fell in love with it then. Sort of went through phases where I was more into it, less into it, things like that. And just always, anytime I could get it, I would get it. Friends that were selling sometimes or whatever, like throughout college and things. I help out a little bit here and there and stuff, but mainly just for like my own personal like consumption. And if I have extra stuff, then just give it to people in my circle or whatever. Um, and yeah, man, I just like I never like became like a grower, but just like an enthusiast and a consumer. Sort of like I love beer, like craft beer, but like I have no idea. I never knew
Right.
make it type thing. So
Right, right. No, no, I like that you said it's all relative, right? Because definitely when I'm on I was raised on the West Coast, but I was smoking some stress for sure at the start. But it's all you know what I mean. You had to learn throughout time. It did its job when when I discovered it.
yeah.
What point did you start viewing, like, obviously now you're an entrepreneur in the legal space? At what point did it kind of become like a light bulb went off where you're like, yo, I could actually get a career in this space?
Yeah, so I had some friends, a few different things happened, like, we were smoking a lot of weed, like, a lot of me and all my friends were, like, smoking a lot of weed, real into it. We started going to some of the legal states, um, like, we go to Colorado. Actually, like, connection to that stuff was, like, more in Colorado before because it was closer to where I was in Cali, and every now and then we go to Cali, but mainly Colorado, and we saw what was going on there, and it was so I was like, "Man, this is crazy." Like, they just really have dispensaries where you can just go in and buy weed. It was like I was like, I feel like a kid at a candy store. The first time I went to like a native root store, it was like one of the greatest moments of my life where it's just like, man, like more different kinds of products than like, I had ever seen. We had like edibles and we made edibles and stuff like that. Everybody, make brownies and stuff growing up very unscientifically and things like that. But to have like very precisely like formulated like products and like all these different forms and like hundreds of strains and stuff like that. It was like incredible. So I was like, man, like, okay, I didn't know if this was just going to be like a Colorado and California thing or if that was going to sort of spread out into other states. Um, and so I kind of like got it on my radar at that point. And then I had some friends from the South that moved out to Cali like 2014 or something like that and got involved in the medical market on the business side, and then started doing real good at the time. And so I was like, oh man, like people are really doing this. But I was like, I'm not moving to California. So I was like, put it on the back burner until it comes out here. Um, and then Illinois started to talk about rec. Like we had a medical market. I actually didn't know that much about the medical market. And they started talking about
Mhm.
rec. And I had this other job, obviously still like smoking weed and stuff like that all the time. But I was just like doing like corporate like mergers and acquisitions and stuff like that, and like security stuff, like super boring. Like learned a lot. It helped out in the business side for sure, but like not something that I was passionate about. Obviously, like who's passionate about, you know, securities work, and well, some people are mergers and acquisitions, but I wasn't. And so wanted like a different lifestyle, something like more fun and cool on the weekends. Of course, I'm like, sort of in the Chicago nightlife scene and art and music and events and like parties and stuff like that. And like cannabis is like a big part of that, whether it's like musicians and artists using it or just people at those events, and enhances your, you try some really good food. Have you tried this really good food when you were high? Like it's different. And so, like, it became a part of just, like, you know, like, anything we were doing outside of work because it just enhanced the experience, and it was fun, and it wasn't like alcohol. So, I was like, "Man, I would love to get into this," and I feel like that just even just, like, having that desire and speaking that sort of, like, drew me into the space. And so I was at my other job doing that boring stuff, and a random recruiter hit me up and was like, "Hey, are you interested in joining this really fast-growing cannabis company in Chicago?" And at this point, I had not heard of any of this. Like, I'd never been into any dispensary in Chicago. This was still during medical. I didn't even know that much about the medical cars. I was just getting mine the same way we always did and stuff, or from Colorado. Actually, mainly probably from there. And so, like, yeah, so I heard about this and I was like, let me look into this. So I like Googled the company and looked them up, and there was this TED talk by the CEO at the time, this guy named Pete Cadens. And he was doing a TED talk about their cannabis company they were launching, and they had a grow up in Massachusetts in Holyoke, and it was like, they were trying to put their facilities in communities that had been devastated by the war on drugs and provide us opportunity. And I just didn't know what the industry was going to be like. I heard so much bad stuff about the
Mhm.
industry, sort of west of Illinois, that I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with all that. I don't even know if I want to be involved. But I was just like, but I also like, this is like, I love this. Like, I love this plant. And so I was like, here's my opportunity to like jump into the legal side of it and just like see what I can make happen. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. They're looking for the exact type of like, you know, skill set that I have from this non-cannabis stuff. So let me just take this. And I was like, I'm gonna get that job. And so I emailed the recruiter back. And at that point, I was just like, you couldn't tell me anything else. Like, I'm going to work in again. I immediately, even before right when I hit send, I think before I sent my resume or anything, I texted like all my like weed smoking friends and stuff, all my weed friends, and was like, yo, I'm about to go work at this company. And they was like, "Oh, really? You got the job?" I was like, "No, I haven't even applied yet." But I was like, "I'm about to go work at this company, and I'm just gonna be in the weed industry." And they were like, "What? Okay, bro." Like fire emojis. And then I sent my resume off and everything to the recruiter. She loved it. I went through the interview process, like a long interview process. I got it, and that company ended up becoming Green Thumb Industries. It was Green Thumb Industries, but that meant nothing to me because they were private, they were small, and I didn't know anything about any of the legal companies. And so I got to be involved with them, and like before they were a public company, before they had grown really big, in the process of them scaling really fast. And this is also before I knew that a lot of the really big companies in the industry, or at least like probably 3 or 4 of the top 5 or top 10 biggest companies, were based in Chicago. So it was just kind of
Mhm.
like fortunate, whereas like, yeah, for like the plant, like production and like ingenuity on like new form factors and strains and all that stuff that's not coming out of here. But as far as like the expansion, I'm not gonna say it's not coming out here. It's not coming out here like it is in Cali. But as far as
Right.
the expansion and growth of the industry, a lot of the money and the companies and the structure has come out of Chicago. So Green Thumb Industries, Cresco, PharmaCann, Verano, like and more, Revolution, like those companies were based out of Chicago. So I got really fortunate to, learn a lot about that side of the business, that sort of core business growth and capital and finance, and make a lot of relationships, which ultimately helped me when I won a license, and saved us a ton of money. And so I got in that way. I also got involved in like the legal advocacy stuff. because I come from a community that's been devastated by the war on drugs. I have friends involved growing up in the unregulated economy, not necessarily so much cannabis, but cannabis was a part of it. Like the people in my neighborhood, they sold.
Mhm.
It wasn't like there was. I mean, everybody has a weed guy, a weed man, but like my friends, or the people I was around and stuff like that, just from the neighborhood or whatever, they, so several different things. It's kind of like,
Mhm.
so, sometimes that involves a lot of other activity and stuff like that, other than just like, the stereotype that, the cannabis industry, even though the unregulated market is like a lot, more chill place because cannabis consumers are different from like other, not trying to like demonize or like stereotype other ones, but from other substances and stuff like that. It's just like a sort of different economy a lot of times. And the plant, it's like people don't smoke weed and then like just go and do a bunch of violent stuff necessarily, or it doesn't add to that. Whereas like with alcohol and other substances, sometimes that can be the case. So there's a different vibe with the plant in that way. But, just the community that I was in, there wasn't that clear division like it would be like if you were in college or in, some other environment. So I seen what it had done. And so I definitely cared a lot about that. Like definitely the plant, high quality products, stuff like that. But then also ensuring that people who have been unfairly targeted in the war on drugs had opportunity to participate in the industry. And like, I grew up paranoid about having the plant my entire life. Like when I was a kid, when I first came around it, it was a felony to have as much weed as my friends had. And it's not like
Mhm.
it was so much, but in Alabama, like I think even selling a joint was a felony at the time. I think it was like a felony if
Yeah.
you sold a joint, which is crazy. So, because yeah, so anyway, so like, and I don't have any convictions or anything like that, but um, so yeah, it was just like, the weight of that was always felt. So it sort of affected the way that we even enjoyed the plan. Like it wasn't just this freeness of it that sometimes you get in states where it's less, the penalties are less harsh. It was like, man, this is a really cool plan. But it was always in the back of your mind, like, yeah, I mean, if you get caught with this, even if it's just like
Mhm.
giving a friend a joint for $10 or $20 or something like that, you may never go to college, or you may never, never get a regular job again and stuff like that. And people have those real stories. We know people that have those real stories. So it was important for me when I got in the industry to ensure that people who, come from areas, or, even that don't come from areas that have been affected like that by the war on drugs, can participate in the industry, because it was so unfair because everybody didn't have that experience with the plant. And so there just needs to be something done to rectify that sort of, in a lot of wars is war on black and brown people, for a lot of different reasons. And, as someone who studied criminal law and stuff like that, understand the history of it. It's not about the drug, like Ronald Reagan said, or his advisor said, it was never about the drugs. It was about criminalizing the left, political folks. I was involved in a lot of political work in Chicago, and black and brown folks. And so over a political game. And so it's important for governments to recognize that, and try to fix that and do something for it. So got involved in the social equity work and all that stuff in Chicago, which also really helped position me to be, the operator, and have the position in the industry that I have today. So that's how I got into it. I skipped over a whole lot of stuff in terms of like getting the license, and we bootstrapped it, and like hours and hours and hours of work. Because in Illinois, it's really hard to get a license. It's a
Mhm.
really competitive process. It takes a lot of money, and we didn't have a lot of money, but we had a lot of know-how, and we had a lot of grit and drive. And so we were able to win one of these coveted licenses. After, so I worked at GTI, I left because I was like, I want to do my own thing. I know how their company runs. This is great. At this point, they're a big company, like one of the top two or three in terms of revenue and licenses in the country. I helped us get there, and like we scaled really quickly in the time that I was there. But I was like, I always wanted to build something for myself, and wanted to launch a brand, in particular brands that I felt like would connect with people like myself and my friends, and just people in our age group. I feel like there's a big disconnect sometimes in a lot of the products, especially in Illinois,
Mhm.
between like, some of the companies that are seen as more corporate, and then just what I see in the Chicago cannabis community, whether it's on the north side, northwest side, whether it's, the south side, or just whatever. And with the artists and all those folks, like there's weren't a lot of brands that I felt like connected and spoke to them. So we wanted to launch a brand that we knew did, because my friends were like, my social circle was like all those people. And that was what I was hearing from them. And so ultimately got licenses, and then that brings us to Lab 11. which we just had a launch party last night. And, I'll talk more about that, but I'll stop there for a minute.
Here now, man. Here now. Yeah, it's you mentioned something about Chicago kind of being the epicenter of business, right? Like the West Coast is known for culture and kind of innovation on breeding and a lot of the hype that whether it's real or just lives online, a lot of that originates out of the West Coast. But it makes it it creates these obstacles where it's competitive on hype or quality or genetics, right? But I think a lot of people kind of gloss over when you look at Illinois and Chicago specifically is it gets competitive based on money, right? Because you have all of those big companies that's not well, I mean, it's well funded, well structured, and a deep bench of people that understand these different components of operating the game from a regulatory and a business standpoint. So it makes it super competitive. So applaud you for being able to get out on your own and do it, because Lord knows that's difficult in that area for sure. And beyond just like wanting to do it for yourself, because I heard you express that, and I've heard the same thing. A lot of these corporate companies kind of aim for the can of curious, if you will, or the older crowd, right? Which is the most, in my opinion, the most oversaturated target consumer for a lot of, like, it's, I don't know, that consumer doesn't spend a lot of money on weed, and a lot of people are gunning for that consumer. It kind of baffles me why so many people are.
Right.
But I've always said something, and maybe you can expand on it more. I've always said, like, you can tell a lot of the pre-existing cannabis in not just Illinois, but Chicago specifically, is not penetrating the culture because the music from Chicago is so mainstream.
Mhm.
And obviously cannabis is a common theme in there, but I don't ever hear any local Chicago companies really shouted out in this mainstream music. And I was just like, as a hip hop fan, I was like, I can tell the legal weed in Chicago is not tapped into the culture, because you would be hearing it the same way you hear from West Coast artists. Is that true? And can you speak to that?
Oh man, no, 100%. I can't imagine. I don't even want to say any names in particular of the companies, but I can't imagine any of the popular Chicago rappers like name dropping one of the large MSOs. Let's just say it, yeah, one of the large MSOs. There's no shade to them, but it just wouldn't like it wouldn't make any sense. And so yeah, there's a disconnect. And so that's something that we want to help bridge, where like a lot of our friends are like, some of these artists, and definitely shout out to 93 Boys and some of the other brands and stuff like that. 1937 Group, 1930. 93 Boys is Big Pencil's brand. So, he's a Chicago artist. And so, he's doing that just by existing. And then 1937 is another social equity group that's connecting with different artists. I think they just are collabing with Little Reese, rapper out of Chicago, to do something. And then we got a lot of artists that have just been in our circle that we want to collab with, and definitely have them shouting out, our stuff. But more so just like, just tapping in that culture and giving them a voice in the cannabis space, and just like us all creating together, because, cannabis inspires their creation, and it inspires the creative stuff that we do in terms of branding and merch and everything. And just like really bringing, like you mentioned before, like Cali definitely is known for the hype and the quality. And that's not a bad thing. Like, I want to be hype and excited about my weed. I don't want to just be like, oh, okay, cool. Here's another blue package with, or a red package or whatever, with, some company name on it that I've never met and never seen them out at any events and stuff like that. Like, we want, and then the quality is just like, yeah, okay, it's weed, it's fine, it's clean. I know that. Like, we need more hype and quality in Illinois and in Chicago on the legal side. There's definitely some of that on the unregulated side. So we want to bring that, and we want to bring some of the folks, from that side over here, and have them, give them the opportunity to get their brands on dispensary shelves too. And so, yeah, I mean, that's one of our missions, is to like bring some of that quality, the hype, and more design that you see in other spaces, in fashion, in restaurants. Chicago has an amazing restaurant scene. Like, my good friend Manny Mendoza, who we did the co-brand, the co like launch event yesterday for his brand and for my brand. He's a real chef. Like, he went to School of Americas. He's from Pilsen in Chicago. He's worked in San Diego. He's worked in Chicago. All the chefs. You go to any restaurant in Chicago that's kind of like hypey and like new and has really good food, and you mention Andy, they like, oh yeah, I know him, man. He's crazy. So then, crazy in a good way. Like, his food is good, and you know, and so like bringing more folks like that into the industry, they're going to bring these unique, products, these craft products. Ultimately, what we have is a craft license, and so what we need in Illinois is that craft vibe, where it's like so many cultivators in Cali, I would call like craft. Like a lot of the
Mhm.
cultivators are like, even if they're kind of big, there's that craft touch and feel and branding and like attention to detail and the quality of the plant, that you don't get so much in Illinois. So trying to bring.
Yeah. That's what you look at, like Cali. A lot of a lot of the brands have started with growers, right? Have grown out from growers. Where obviously, if that's the brand is headed up by someone that's touching the plants, it's going to get that touch. And the companies that the brands that don't have that, it might just be the guys that always sold it and didn't really grow it. They got that connection to the people that have that passion, and they're going to bring it. And that's the one of the most important things. But there's kind of this. So Lab 11 is the brand you guys just did the launch event for last night, which is under the ÜMI Farms umbrella. Can you kind of break down the structure? Because obviously ÜMI Farms is vertically integrated, going to have retail, plant touching brands, and then also kind of a host of different brands under that. But what's kind of the separation of church and state there?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so there's like a brand sort of aesthetic separation, and then like, well, let me back up and just say, okay, so the parent company, that's like Umi. Umi is like the big thing that we're doing. That's like the grand vision, and sort of the Umi Farms vision and aesthetic is like, exploring like the diversity of the plant with the lived outdoors as like city people. So it's like, yeah, we live in Chicago or in New York. My partner lives in New York, and so I go back and forth there, and we'll talk about like sort of the New York market too, which is crazy and fun, and stuff like that. But like we also like hiking and like being outdoors and like smoking our weed outside, and smoke weed inside too. But like to be out in the lived environment, and that's ultimately like what gives us like the plant. And so Umi stands for mother. I got that inspiration while smoking weed and listening to music, and like this Most Def song, my Umi, like it means
Mm.
mother in Arabic and stuff like that. And so you think about it, all the connections with the plant, and Mother Earth, Mother Plant, all that stuff. So that's where inspiration comes from, and you'll see that in our dispensary design. It's very like, it's very earth centered. We're not gonna say we're like the most sustainable. We're trying to get there. Like it's expensive, and we're still figuring out what sustainability looks like. But our goal is to like be progressively more sustainable too, without sacrificing quality and still making money and stuff like that. As people who live in the third biggest city in the country, but Chicago has tons of parks, and we love. I like to pop edible, smoke a little bit, then walk through the park. I did that all through COVID. Washington Park, Jackson Park on the south side, these huge, enormous, amazing parks, and so that inspires a lot of the brand concept. So there's that at the top, and then there's retail stores, which we call Umi. There'll be Umi product brand, and then there's our lab in our kitchen. And basically, we went not the opposite direction, but it's just like a totally different brand aesthetic and feel, with our extraction lab and kitchen. Even though obviously we're making products for Umi and for Lab 11, but Lab 11 is just like all about like cannabis nostalgia. Like we thought about like the inspiration was like bringing back that feeling of your first high, and it's like that amazing feeling when you first discover cannabis or first fall in love with the plant. And like, where were you? What were you doing? Like nostalgia is like big. Like, and as people that are getting older and stuff like that, you want to remember some of the good old days and the things that like when life was simpler and things. And sometimes when the industry was simpler, like it's cool. I love being on the legal side too. But some of that culture and some of this like the vibes and the energy, I feel like has been lost a little bit in the corporatization of cannabis. And like, we want to like remember that and save some of that and then bring some of it back along with some of those other just amazing memories from your experience growing up that aren't necessarily about cannabis, but like were enhanced, or maybe you heard some specific things or beats or noises or sounds in a song that you wouldn't have picked up on before, but for cannabis. Or maybe there's some food or a meal that you had, and it was just like, the first time I had that, I was smoking, Blue Dream or something like that, and it was just like amazing and stuff like that. So like really bringing some of that back is what we're trying to do with Lab 11.
I love that, man. That nostalgia. That's what I feel like. Like at least in my life, cannabis has been such a big part of my life. I definitely can associate, as you consume cannabis, right? Whether there's certain flavors of the cannabis or just, I don't know, the unexplainable vibes or whatever feelings you get that kind of take you back to different points just because, myself, probably like yourself and a lot of others have consumed a lot of cannabis for a long time. And so it's been a part of so many experiences. Just partaking in some cannabis can almost like take you through a trip of nostalgia to other experiences that maybe cannabis was a component of. And so I really like that approach.
Yep, exactly. And that's it. So, with Lab 11, we're going to do some newer strains. We're going to mix it up, but definitely want to bring back some like old classics and stuff like that we just really love. Like, I mean, like I definitely love some of the newer strains, but sometimes it's hard to keep up with them, especially as somebody like not in California. Like I don't know how y'all do it in California. Like every day it'd be like a new cross with some new strains that I just learned what they are, and now they cross with some other stuff, and I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
don't even know. And not that that's a bad thing anyway. Like I think it's dope. Um, but for a lot of consumers and myself included, sometimes I just like want a really good version of like that classic thing.
Yeah.
So some of our first strains that we're coming to market with are going to be like the Bear Dance that I mentioned, which has been a popular strain here. Redheaded Stranger, and we're doing some others and stuff like that. So, um, and then on the Umi side, we're going to get a little bit more creative and forward with some of the strains, but try to like produce them in ways that are a little bit more sustainable. And then the other brand that we're bringing out, this my growers brand, is Chicago Kush, which a lot of people already know about and has some really, really bomb strains. And so I'm excited for all that. And along with all that is going to be like really dope merch. Like we definitely care about, the style and aesthetic and like you know, again, not to like, knock other people and stuff like that, but, the same amount of attention and care that we put into the plant and the formulations and things like that for our products, we want to put into the visual representations of our products, whether that's like, the website design, the visuals, the experience at our events and stuff, and the merch. So,
I mean, I like that approach. I'd read a quote or something from yourself before we did this, where you talk about the plant basically being a power source, or correct me if I'm wrong, a source of connection. I think between just communities, culture, people, kind of all over the place. So I'm kind of, I mean, I share a similar thought on that, but I'm kind of curious from your perspective, just what if you can expand a little bit more on that, just the power of cannabis and how it just can bring people together.
yeah, 100%. Basically, like the way you said it, it's like Umi is like like the whole thing is powered by the plant, whether it's the source of connection to the past with like Lab 11, these like amazing memories and feelings and things like that, and these experiences, or with Umi, it's like it's a power of connection across states, sometimes countries, regions. So, maybe we got like, this dope like Afghani strain that we're connecting, people in the US with the Middle East, or stuff coming from the Caribbean. And there's folks in the US connected with the Caribbean or from Florida, with like East Coast sour diesel and the stories behind that and connections between like New York and Florida. Like we just want to explore all those things and like the global cannabis economy and trade. And so that's another form of connection. And in addition to like connecting with each other, like, you know, there's been times where I've had jobs and I've been working and there's been around people and I'm like, I kind of don't like that person, during the day. And then like in the industry, and then after work or something like that, we'll be at an event and we'll be smoking and stuff like that. And then I connected with that person. I'm like, you know what? Actually, I like them now. So it's like just so many different ways that like cannabis has like helped establish connections and to our past, to ourselves, and to other people. And we want to celebrate that in as many ways as we can.
No, I love that because that's why I've always said, like it's a little bit less now, but more so in the past, right? And maybe in places where cannabis isn't as open and isn't as free and isn't as accessible, right? Like kind of to get the chance to consume it and whether it was like by choice, like you kind of almost had to hide it or like you didn't have it so you had to consume it with someone else. It was such a communal just
Yeah.
activity, right? But we also have like our personal connection because cannabis kind of takes you in your own mind. But when you have like that experience like internalized and then that community aspect, I think it's always allowed people to be like really vulnerable, and give people a choice to sit in a cipher circle, if you will, and share ideas about thoughts that you wouldn't usually share with other people, right? And it breaks down barriers. Even if you disagree with someone or come from a completely different walk of life, you can kind of connect with people on just a different frequency, just due to kind of the aspect of how you're consuming, but then also your internal process that you go through.
Yeah, that's really it, man. It's connecting on that different frequency, like, and there's so many like, cannabis ponds, like, get higher, higher level and blah, 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 blah. But it does, like, those are real. Like, you connect with people on different frequency, you connect with yourself, your thoughts, like even feelings and stuff like that. Like sometimes, you connect, you smoke or whatever, you consume cannabis, and sometimes you connect with like feelings that don't feel as good about yourself, but maybe you need to recognize and see those and like work through those. And sometimes you connect with like, more, exciting feelings or happy feelings or, chill, but like it's definitely a source of connection and higher frequency and like looking at things a different way. And it's funny, like, we didn't invent this. I forgot who came up with this, but me and my friends will like be like, ideas are only valid if they make sense when, you're sober, when you're drunk, and when you're high individually. So you gotta have a debate, and the idea has to make sense sober. Gotta have a debate. It's gotta make sense after a few drinks. And you gotta have a debate. It's gotta make sense after smoking. And if it's valid in all those, like, then we're gonna agree that thing is true.
It passes the test, man. Well, I appreciate that, man. And I really appreciate your time today, Keely. For people out there that want more information, man, UMIFarms.com. You can check that out. Anything else you want to plug before we get you up out of here, man?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely want to plug Lab 11. So check out our website at thelab11.com. That's thelab11.com. And then, of course, check us out on Instagram. You can check out a lot of the photos and pictures from our event last night with Chocola. That's Get Lab 11 on Instagram. So yeah, follow us. Umi's on there too. Got a lot of stuff on the way, merch, a lot of visuals, brand assets, and a lot of other activations and stuff in and around the Chicago area. So if you're ever in town, definitely tap in, come check us out, and hopefully at some point we'll make it to a city near you. So.
Yeah. Growth, man. I really appreciate your time today, man. This is the RMR Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, there's a subscribe button somewhere below Akele over there. If you listen to Spotify, Apple, favorite this channel. Make sure to check out some older episodes and stay tuned. We got new stuff coming out every week and new content at respectregion.com every single day of the week, even on holidays, man. Appreciate everyone tapping in.